ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for being here in Hermosa Beach for tonight's Q&A with this panel of legends. We are so happy to have you all here. Thank you very much for making it. Immediately to my left here, he was inducted into the Beach Volleyball Hall of Fame in 1995. He was a member of the 1964 Indoor Olympic Volleyball team. He has stats I could go on about all night long, but I'll just give you a couple. In his first ever beach volleyball tournament, he defeated the #1 team in the world. He won an astonishing 55% of the tournaments he ever played in throughout his storied career. He had multiple seasons where he won every tournament he played in. It's funny.
2.
That's right, 2, multiple. He is certainly on the short list of the greatest players in the history of our sport. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for the great Ron Lang. Next, inducted into the Beach Volleyball Hall of Fame in 1994. Again, the accolades could go on forever, but from 1973 to 1982, he partnered with Greg Lee in 30 tournaments. They won 25 of those tournaments. They finished second 3 times and third twice. They never finished outside of the top 3. Among his numerous accolades, he won the Manhattan Open 5 times. He won the first World Championships with big money involved. I believe it was $2,500. We can fact check that later. And he set the all-time record for the most open wins in a row when he and Greg Lee won an astounding 13 tournaments in a row. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Jim Mangus. Immediately on his left, inducted into the Beach Volleyball Hall of Fame in 1996, he was a member of the 1968 Indoor Olympic team. He was known throughout his career as one of the very best co-ed players during the peak of co-ed popularity. Both his wife, Barbara, and his daughter, Misty, are also enshrined in the Beach Volleyball Hall of Fame. This makes the Mays the only family where a father, mother, and child are all in the Hall of Fame. Please help me welcome the legendary Butch May. Misty's already fact-checking. And our token female for the night, inducted into the CBVA Beach Volleyball Hall of Fame in 2017, Misty is a 3-time Olympic gold medalist and 4-time Olympian. Her partnership with Kerry Walsh became the stuff of legend when they won 19 consecutive tournaments and 112 straight matches. Their dominance left no doubt about who was the world's best beach team of all time. Misty ended her career with a mind-boggling 112 open victories, and she is definitely among the very greatest players to ever step on a beach volleyball court. Please help me give a huge Hall of Fame welcome to Misty May. So we already have some fact checking going on up here. I can tell Misty's just chomping at the bit. But I'm going to start out with Mr. Lang. And by the way, I've had many people in the last weeks and months come up to me and say, this is a great idea to get this panel together. And people keep coming up and kind of telling me like, oh, this was such a great idea. And I've made sure to tell everybody, this was Mr. Lang's idea. This was not my idea. So thank you very much for driving down from Sacramento at 86 years young. We very much appreciate you being here. I had the privilege of spending some time on the phone with each of you ahead of time to do a little pre-interview, and with Ron, I really felt like I never wanted to get off the phone. He has so many great stories, and there's so many legendary things that happened, but a few of the things really stand out. It was hard for me to believe how good you got so fast. So why I would like to know more about that. You said you learned how to play volleyball. You were going down to body surf, and there were too many jellyfish in the water, and so you ended up playing. And now a couple years later, fast forward, and you're beating Gene Selznick in an open. So why don't you talk us through that a little bit? How did that happen?
Well, he's right about the beach and the jellyfish. And I walked up to the court because it was the only thing to do when you're 16 years old and can't go in the water to surf. So I asked if I could take winners, and I promptly got beat 8-0. And there was two guys. They taught me how to play. I hated playing with them because they kept telling me, run, move your feet, you can get to that ball. Don't bounce that. Get your hands on the ball, raise your hands up high, get your feet this way. And I hated playing with them. But after I got pretty good, I would play during the summertime every day, 4 or 5 hours, and then I'd go indoors, and there was some place to play short court doubles 5 nights a week. When I was as good as I was ever going to be, I was playing 5, 6 hours a day at the beach, and I played mixed against men's teams indoors. That's it.
And so when you played in your first tournament, did you have any inkling how good you were? At that moment, did you believe you could beat Gene Selznick in the number one team?
I had no idea who they were. We played them the last match of the day on Saturday, and my partner had gone in the sand, in the beach. I said, come on, we got a match. He says, who are you playing? Who are we playing? I said, Bernie and Gene. He knew who they were. So we went out and ended up beating them, but they got their revenge. They beat us 15-2 in the finals of the losers bracket, so it was an important win for me, but I got the win.
And then just a couple years after that, you were playing with Gene.
Well, I like to say this about Gene. I think Gene doesn't get enough credit for what he brought to the game. In 1955, Gene was all-world in Paris, I believe, at the all-world tournament. And when he came back to the States, he wanted to play the way they're playing now indoors. Real fast game. In 57, he started a team. And that's how I got to be playing with Gene. First tournament, we played Barry Brown and Mike O'Hara, two guys with guns for arms. We played them in an absolute gale at Santa Barbara. They had every ball on top of the net, and we lost. The next weekend was Laguna Beach. We lost our first match because Gene dinked a perfect set. And I'm thinking to myself, I spent a whole year trying to lobby to play with this clown. And he doesn't try all the time. We would practice at State Beach, and he'd say, Lang, I'm going to push the ball in the net, get it out. He just pushed the ball in the net. Go get it. Tough guy to beat in the losers bracket. That's
so, Jim, I know when you came along, you were kind of hiding out on those outer courts, and you were watching Ron dominate on the main court, right? What do you remember about that time?
The summer of '69 is when I started to go to the beach. Back then, Von Hagen and Lang were the team to beat. They were like the best. So all the good players, you played on this one court, A court. We'd watch them play, but we played up by the ivy on the second court, and we started to play. I was playing with Shamalis and Niles and Randy Sieber and all this. We'd play up there. And we started to get a little better. These guys said, well, come play on A court. And if you had to win to stay on the court. So the first time Shamalis and I go up to play these guys, the score is like 7-0. Then it's 8-0. Lang goes, next. I go, what do you mean next? He goes, you're gone. 8-0, get out of here. I didn't go back up there for like 6 months because I was afraid to play against those guys. In fact, the best one though, this one I really like. Sereno Beach, I'm playing these two guys.
I love this story.
Yeah, playing with Shamalis. We've just now gotten to start to get, we're pretty good, but it's our home
They had us 13-11.
12-8. We're going to win the game.
That's right.
Lang goes back and serves a sky ball, 10 feet out of bounds. But it's going to come down on this umbrella with a lady holding her kid. So I go and grab the ball. Lang goes, point. I go, what do you mean? He goes, can't catch a ball. Great. We never scored another point. The thing about Lang was like super good at everything. He was a great server, passer, setter, digger, he could do all this stuff. But his best attribute was he just wanted to kill you. And whenever you played him, whether it was during the week or in a tournament, he just wanted to crush you. So the next time you played him, you thought about that. I learned that from him. You got to try to crush people when you play them, and then they don't think they're as good anymore. Lang was the best at that, the mental part of it.
Fast forward a couple years from that, because you're saying that that first year you were playing on the outer courts, that was 69?
1970.
So what was your first Manhattan Open win?
75
So you
with Greg.
You got good pretty quick there, huh?
Well, I won like a tournament in 73, won 2 in 74, and then in 75, Greg and I, that's when we started to get good.
Right.
And then between 75 and 76, we won 13 in a row.
Right. And so we'll talk more about that later for sure, but the dynamic I want to hear about right now is you came into the sport idolizing this guy and seeing him destroy everybody, and just a few years later, you're battling against him in finals of Opens.
Yeah.
So what did that feel like the first time you had an Open final with him, or you beat him?
I can't remember when I beat Lang in an Open tournament, to tell you the truth, but it just, you learn, once you learn how to win, then you start to believe in yourself, at least for me. It took me longer. Greg got good in like a year, and Shamalis got better than me a little quicker too. But once I figured out I could play with these guys, or I was as good, then you were going to have to play really good to beat me. I wasn't as good at certain things, but I was good enough to where I knew I would win. Because volleyball back when we played, there was no blocking over. Games went to 15 side out. So game might last for an hour and a half. And it just, you had to outlast that person. And it was all about who could control the ball the best, who could put it on closest to the net. Because if you were going to get an 8-foot back set, I was going to dig you. He was going to dig you. He would dig you even if it was an onset. The premium was on how good your ball control was and shape. To win a tournament back in those days, you had to be in really good shape to win. Today's game, it's not like that. It's fast. The games are timed. A match is over in an hour now. Right. So it's a totally different game that what we did and what they're doing now is a different game.
Right. So Butch, I had the pleasure of speaking with you the other day, and you told me some absolutely classic stories. I don't know how much time we have here tonight, but one, you told me a story about Santa Cruz. I started asking you about co-ed, which was a very popular form of the sport, and all the best players, both men and women, were playing at that time. And Butch was known as one of the best co-ed players of all time. And you told me a story about a tournament in Santa Cruz, and I'm just wondering if you could tell that for everybody right now.
Oh boy, if my wife was alive. In order to have a legitimate tournament, you needed 16 teams. And I showed up and I was playing with a guy called John Meek, and it was 15. So everybody that had driven all the way up to Santa Cruz says, drove all this way, and it's not going to be a legitimate tournament. And then my wife kept saying, I'll play. So what I did was I played with John, and I played with Barbara. And ironically, we end up, and we're facing each other. And she's telling me, you're gonna play with me. And I said, well, I came here to play with John. You're playing with me. So.
How was that ride home from Santa Cruz?
It was a long ride home from Santa Cruz. Because I did play with John. We got a third in that tournament. But Barbara, this is how she rode in a Volkswagen bus all the way back. And it's about a 6.5-hour drive all the way back to Santa Monica, and it was quiet.
Absolutely classic, and just so funny to think how the sport has evolved in these days, and that stuff like that was going on. Another thing that popped up, Butch, recently, that video, I think it was Bobby Hurwitz posted, and it was just a random, like, rated, unrated tournament. It was probably sometime in the early 80s, but to me it was just such a classic time capsule of the period. And for other people who haven't seen it, it was just an outtake, but Butch was either involved in running the tournament or his buddy was running the tournament, and Jeff Southcott, who was one of the top players at the time, was just absolutely blowing brain because he couldn't play with who he wanted to play. And it was just, to me, so apropos of that era where it wasn't about money. You know, there was no money involved, but it was just, I'm not losing to you. I'm going to beat you, and I'm going to try to get every advantage I can to beat you.
Southcott was worried about the player that he was playing with. The year before, Bill Hansard Jr. and Brad Barber had won. So Horowitz, who was setting up the tournaments in Santa Monica, set this tournament up, and I even questioned Bobby, how come they're playing together? That's the way the draw went. Well, Southcott is livid because he's playing with a hamburger. I'm playing with a hamburger. Those are beginners. Everybody wants to be a hot dog in this game, but you start off a hamburger. Show us what you got. Play, make your partner happy. Okay, because there's only one winner. In a pyramid, there's only one person, one team up top. And we went back and forth, and all I kept saying was, then don't play. Now, volleyball players have egos. You don't want to look bad, but you're going to look bad if you pick a hamburger. You know what I mean? Everybody wants a hot dog. So right in the middle of the conversation, Bill Hansard comes up, and he's about 6'5", and he goes, I'm 80 pounds overweight. Brad Barber chimes in, he goes, you're 100 pounds overweight. and these are the things that I get to laugh about now because I get to see myself. What the hell was I doing with a hamburger?
One other quick thing, you liked to give that person an opportunity to play. Maybe the person that wasn't as good as you, maybe they couldn't really play at all, but you were just trying to introduce them to the game and be cool. Why don't we touch on that real quick?
Here's what happened. Jack Adrians, who's no longer with us, if there was knowledge, it was Jack. But towards the end, he had a little bit too much to drink or smoke, I think. He went without his teeth for about 3.5 months, and it was in somebody else's couch. And people are going up to Jack about this advice. Well, Muscle Beach, he had named it, and it was published that it was a sewer of Santa Monica. Fortunately, this is where I met my wife. Misty came down there because we had a lot of friends there. You never knew who was from Yale or jail. That's just the way it was. But the best part about it was I made sure that if there was a hamburger out there that wanted to play, Barbara would go, well, Butch will play, right? He'd sell me short, and of course I'd go out there and have a good time. And I always passed on my daughter, who was learning how to play volleyball. It's important that you share your experience with somebody else. You may impress with them, he or she, something that might give them another chance to play one more game. The oldest person I played with was a guy called David Ori. He was from Russia. He came over here during the Bolshevik Revolution, called me my champion. Well, Steno Brunacardi, who had the reputation, kept scratching his name off. And I said, David, I'll play with you. So Gene and Steno played, Dave Ori and I, and we beat him. Now I go swimming, and Ori's drowning. I go, what the hell's wrong with you? He says, well, I never learned how to swim. But that's the kind of beach that we had. Everybody played with somebody.
Very cool, very cool. Misty, everybody knows about all the Olympic success and the heights that you went on to, and, in my mind, one of the very best to ever play the sport, and that's fantastic. But I knew you when you really just were first coming out, and before you'd even played in any professional events. And whenever I think about you, I think about the countless hours spent with Gene and Holly and myself and you. And I remember how hard Gene was on you at that time. And I remember thinking, God, this guy's really, going over the top. Obviously, it ended up being very successful for you. Do you remember that period of time and what was going through your head? And did you have any sense of where you were and the success that you might achieve?
It's funny. I didn't think so because I always wanted to be a veterinarian. I never really thought about being an Olympian, and I'd hear my dad's stories, but I just love playing the sport. And I think when you love doing something, and I'll say like playing for peanuts, because even these gentlemen up here and in the crowd, you played for a beach umbrella, you played for a cooler, you played for a bottle of Labatt. I used to be at the tournaments when they just were so excited to get Labatt's beer. When you are doing something and having so much fun, the work doesn't seem like work. You know, you put in that time. But Gene was like nothing. I mean, when I have to deal with my dad, we could win like 15-1, and he's like, remember that serve you missed? And like, you know, and my mom would be like, hey, just, you know, be proud of her. So he was always hard on me. And I always call him like lifetime coach. To me, this is like my night at the museum, and not that you're all old and like dinosaurs, but this is like dum-dum, you know? This is my night at the museum because I feel like I'm that rare player that got to watch my idols, learn from the legends, and then play with legends and idols. You know, my husband plays baseball, it'd be like him growing up and being able to play with Babe Ruth, Babe Ruth, it just doesn't happen. Right. And the little triangle that I came into, that little Bermuda Triangle, or whatever you want to call it, I was in the right place at the right time, came about at the right time, and was able to hear stories about Ron, but get to see Ron, listen. Right. Mangus, I got to, you know, learn from. He coached Jenny and Nettie when I was first coming, so I got to learn from him. Gene, you know, played with my dad, got to get coached by him. You know, you had to learn the Geneisms, like whatever the language was.
A little more Bob. Remember
Genanese, like, you know, and you knew, and we all knew what that was. We got to see on a high wind day, Gene trip over his feet as he was running down the beach trying to chase a ball bag. That was an adventure. But learning from the older generation, they learned so many different skills that the newer generation kind of doesn't have these days. Like Gene taught us one-handed dig, you know, one-handed digs, how to dig overhand. That wasn't kind of coming into the game. Playing without a block, Holly and I were probably one of the shorter teams out there. And growing up, I learned to play without a block because I was playing with guys at Muscle Beach and all that. But having many legends to learn from, and Gene being one of my first coaches out there, and then I was coached by Dane shortly after. I feel very lucky to have been surrounded by that.
Sure. So just one other thing that I'd like to touch on again, because the way your career turned out was so incredibly successful, and everybody will always focus on the gold medals and all that, and I get it. Your first Olympics, when you were playing with Holly, and you guys, in my mind, were demolishing everybody. And I knew you guys were going to win the gold medal that year. And then you suffered a really bad ab injury, and a lot of people might not remember, but you were serving underhand and sometimes hitting with your left, and you went through and got 5th in the Olympics that way. But what do you remember about that? And did you really think that you had a chance to win, even though you were injured so badly at that time?
It was funny because being a rookie and having a veteran like Holly and someone you idolized pick you out of a pool of players, right? Pick you out of a pool of players.
Shout out Holly.
I mean, that's everybody's dream, right? And if I didn't believe it, she made me believe it, that we were gonna go that far. Great ambassador to follow. She had to start dyeing her hair once I partnered with her. She was like gray free until our bout, but she was a great person to admire and to follow in the footsteps. But she made me believe that we could do it. For those that don't know, the qualification process for FIVB is a 2-year process, and they go by points. Holly and I had 8 tournaments to qualify in, and we beat Liz and Elaine on the last tournament in China by points. And unfortunately, I did hurt myself, but was able to come back and compete, and we fell short, I think by 2 points for the medal round. And that was a great feat within itself, to be able to take our team, 2 split blockers, a rookie, a veteran, 8 tournaments, and be able to accomplish going to the Olympics. But I felt bad because I wanted to get that medal for
Of
Holly.
course, of course. Well, it was a heroic run given the injury, for sure.
So I'm no speaky, but like you said, now I just talk all the time. He knew me when I didn't talk.
When she first came on tour and we first started training with her, my nickname for her was No Speaky, because I would go up to her and say, Misty, how you doing? It was impossible to get a word out of her. And now we can't get her to shut up. So here we are.
No, but going back to how you mentioned playing with different people, you know, making them feel welcome, I feel it makes you a better player too, and I try to instill that on the kids too. Play with beginners because your passing has to be that much better.
It's
Your
true.
ball control has to be that much
It's
better.
true.
Play with him a few years back. Ball control has to be that much better.
Yep,
Except he likes that low pass. He likes that low pass.
absolutely. All right, a question from the audience.
Yeah, thank you. Butch, first of all, I want to thank you for all you've accomplished over the years. It inspired a lot of young athletes at the time, like myself and many others from Hawaii, who were able to play and follow your footsteps with yourself and Pedro Velasco, who we lost earlier this year. So I want to thank you for that. Appreciate that. Want to take you back to then. How did you get to that point? You know, coming from St. Louis and Honolulu, and then coming over and playing on the mainland. What were your steps to get onto the national team?
Well, there was a guy called Bert DeGroot. He was assistant coach on Ronnie's team at the Olympics in Japan. But Bert was a colonel in the Air Force, and the Air Force had the Armed Service Championship throughout the world in his 5 or 6 years that he was a coach. And I met him on the beach, and there was 2 guys, Gordon Mew and Neil Eldridge. Neil was 5'7", 5'6" and a half. Gordon Mew was 6'3", tall Korean airman. And DeGroot says, "You have potential." Of course, all my teachers said that in school. You know, when I'm flunking, they would tell my mom, he has potential. And DeGroot says, if you ever come to the mainland, look him up. At that time, Bert retired from the Air Force, went to the Olympic Club in San Francisco. From there, he went to Santa Monica College, and the rest was history. He put together a junior college team that Ron played against with his team with Gene Selznick, and we just had good players. But what we had was DeGroot gave us the fundamentals. And there's Pat Zartman's out here somewhere. Where's Pat? Pat?
Shout out, Pat.
Pat has started a lot of players on the beach, especially the ladies. And for the ones that have taken their time off to learn from Pat, a lot of them never came back to say thank you. But Pat, I want to thank you for being very patient. And basically, that's what the group did. For the years that he coached at Santa Monica College, they had 5 Olympians that went 64, and the rest of them went in 68.
Thank you very much for that question. If anybody else from the audience would like to ask a question, please make your way up, and we'll get to that. While we're waiting for that, Jim, just one other thing I wanted to touch on. We talked about the other day. I found very interesting. I asked you about that win streak, and you said to you it wasn't that big a deal because it happened over 2 seasons, and you weren't really keyed on it. But I loved what you told me about Lee and how he just was saying, like, those guys are terrible. We're going to crush those guys.
We always felt pretty confident. But we didn't know it was 13. I think it was Captain Jack who came up and said, you know, you've won 13 tournaments in a row. So I didn't really think about it. At that point, we had gotten really consistent, and we were very good. We had really good ball control. We knew we were as good or better than anybody we played. But Greg would, like, you know, before a tournament, we're going to play somebody in the second round. He goes, these guys are terrible. You don't have to warm up or something. I'm always afraid I'm going to lose. And Greg would go, they're terrible. We'll beat them. But it got back to that same thing. You would play certain teams, like Carey and Hare. We played them like 4 times in finals. We just knew we were going to beat them. And I think they thought they were going to lose.
Right.
So.
Right.
It was weird, but yeah, Greg was very, very confident
Right.
athlete.
Right.
Very
And,
confident.
and just to tie that up, Mangus and Lee won 13 opens in a row that spanned 2 seasons. That is still a record. It was later equaled by Karch and Ken, but is still the record for the most
Well,
tournaments.
back then, you never had 13 tournaments in a
Right.
year.
Right, right. Okay, we've got another question from the audience.
The audience is here. This is Nancy Cohen. And I'd like to say that it's really nice to see the 4 of you up there. And Misty, this is directed at you. I was lucky enough to play with and against your mother, Barbara May Grubb, or Grubb May. And I wanted to know, well, first of all, I'd like to say that I think you had skills, like talk about learning skills at the age of maybe 13, 14, developing them and then being confident with them. You learned them probably when you were in the womb. And so that's the kind of thing that you get. And then you get 3 gold medals, you see. So that's why you were so good, because you had 2 parents that knew the game so well. And then you just fell into it, and you were so good that it was unbelievable. And I really enjoyed watching you play. I have to tell you that publicly. And so I wanted to know also if you ever played with your mom, and if you ever played against her, and just how competitive she really was.
I can't remember if I played against my mom, because I probably wouldn't want to do that because she was too competitive. But I did play with her. I don't know so much about the doubles, but there were some pictures I saw. You were even on the team. We played the 6-man, CBVA, and I had a bunch of high school friends and club friends, and we all played. But my mom hated to lose, so very similar to me. It's just I don't let the emotion kind of show, like both my mom and dad. But no, I mean, it would have been fun to play with her if she was
Can we
still alive.
fact check that, Basti?
No, he's very emotional.
Oh, I thought you said he wasn't.
No. Both him and my mom, very, like, you could see the fire. And
Okay.
and there was cussing in that video, by the way. I saw it, yep. The horror,
Love
yeah.
it, love
yep. But for me, I felt like I'm very stoic, kind of,
Yeah.
you don't know if I'm winning or losing,
Right.
but still very intense.
Right.
But I would, if she was still alive, it'd be fun to get out there. Probably more so on the tennis. I'd pick her up for pickleball.
Right.
Because she'd want to murder people. She was a tennis player, so.
Nice. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Nancy. I think we have time for one more question, and I see inductee Sam Lagana here.
Thanks, Chris. Looking at the sign behind you, the California Beach Volleyball Association, this is kind of directed to Butch and to Jim, your day, and I'm blessed to have watched all of you play. But Butch and Jim, at one point you both decided to migrate to becoming tournament directors. Butch, you started running tournaments, CBVA tournaments and so forth, and Jim, you started becoming a tournament director on the AVP tour. What was that like, transitioning from the player attitude to an administrator attitude with beach players?
I lost a lot of money. It was one of those things that Selznick said this tournament is, this beach is it can run itself. No, it couldn't. People came down, as some players do, maybe the CBVA. Everybody keeps track on points, so it's easier today. Then I already played them last week. I don't want to play them again. That type of thing. So you start crossing names off, and then you're replacing names. And but I had a lot of respect for beach directors. Gene Popko, always worried about, you're taking money out of my mouth. If I had 2 more players.
Gene's here tonight, by the way. Gene's here.
Huh?
Gene Popko's
Oh,
here.
yeah, Gene. But it was one of those things that Selznick came down and said, how much money did you make this weekend? I said, well, I lost about $800. And I said, why don't you give me half of that? Gene always said somebody else, who was this guy, the old guy? Lenny. he would send Lenny. Yeah. So Lenny would come down and go, Butch, Gene wants half the money. And I started laughing. I said, well, here's a receipt. This is how much I lost. But because of that, I got to enjoy new people coming in to volleyball, number one. We always gave good prizes. Selznick did do me a favor. He gave me a box of trophies that were probably 18 or 20 years old.
Older.
And so I said, I'm just going to change the plaque. And then I realized 1/3 of those trophies were mine.
I got one of those trophies.
Jim, how about you?
Yeah, well, I started to do that. I tried to come back when I was 40 on the AVP tour, and I wasn't very good. But so then Matt Gage offered me that I could do some of his, when he wasn't going to go, I would be a tournament director. So I said, that sounded interesting, so I did it. I really enjoyed it. I liked watching. First of all, you have to go to a beach, and you have to set up this whole beach. It's an empty beach, and you have to put in courts, and then the grandstands, and all this stuff. And then you watch the tournament happen. So the only deal was some players were kind of pricks. Sorry.
No way.
So you have a lot of egos, and some guys were a little difficult to handle sometimes, but I enjoyed watching it and then running the tournament and then seeing the end. It was fun. I just like watching beach volleyball. I really enjoy watching the game played.
Absolutely. All right, we have run over time a little bit. We're right at the time that the induction ceremony is supposed to happen. But just please, a big round of applause for these legends. Thank you so much to all of you for being here tonight. And we hope to do something similar every year. So thank you very much. Enjoy yourself tonight. Thank you.